morning. How are you? It's great to be with you. I want to say special thanks to Dr. Larry Chu for having me and for your leadership. And also a huge shout out to Susanna Fox, who is an inspiration, there she is, and who is my connection to this community, so thank you. So one of my favorite speeches of all time was the commencement address that George Saunders gave in 2013 at the Syracuse University commencement. And in speaking to the young graduates, Saunders helped them anticipate their futures. He said, "The things we regret most in life are not the things that you might expect, but rather failures of kindness. Those moments when another human being was there, in front of us, suffering, and we responded sensibly, mildly, reservedly." Or to look at it from the other end of the telescope, he said, "Who in your life do you remember most fondly with the most undeniable feelings of warmth? Those who were kindest to you." Now, Saunders goes on to admit that kindness is, in fact, not easy, but he believes that it becomes more natural with age. He quotes the poet Hayden Carruth, who wrote near the end of his life that he was mostly love now. Saunders wished for the graduates to embrace this awareness early and avoid failures of kindness, and instead strive to be ever more kind and connected to others, and ultimately, mostly love. I don't know if they were born this way or if they eventually became this way, but my grandparents, when I came into their lives, were certainly mostly love from my experience. I grew up in an immigrant family, so had the great gift of having my grandparents play a huge role in raising me. And they showered my sister and me with kindness. They cared for us, they laughed with us, and they taught me all kinds of important perspective on life. From my grandmother, I learned to appreciate and cultivate laughter. She's one of those people who believes that if you laugh from your belly 3 times a day, you'll be healthy your whole life, and then one day you'll just die. And she also taught me how to use the potty, which turned out to be very useful. And she also taught me how to cook, although we both agree that that is still very much a work in progress. From my grandfather, I learned hard work and discipline. I also learned Tai Chi. He was a lifelong Tai Chi practitioner. And I remember growing up watching him practice early in the mornings from my window. He would be in the driveway for hours, slow and steady motions. It was also with him that I developed a deep appreciation for the hidden strategies of the television show Wheel of Fortune. I feel incredibly fortunate to have grown up with both of them, 2 incredibly extraordinary people. And while they were on different sides of my family, actually had very similar life trajectories, defined by poverty in China, war, migration, hard work, each a very full life of hardship and triumph. And then later in life, their stories diverge. My paternal grandfather lived to the age of 93, a long and very healthy life, probably in no small part due to the Tai Chi. But in the final months, my father actually did not have the ability to care for him when his vision started to deteriorate, and we couldn't find appropriate home care support for him. So we had to place him in a nursing home against his wishes. And the memory of visiting him there is still incredibly vivid in my mind. My grandfather's bed was in a dark room that he shared with 6 other people. And it was, for some reason, the hallway lights didn't work and were flickering. Half the people in the room were completely still and unmoving, and the other half were in extreme discomfort and suffering. And although he was alive enough to tell me he was afraid, I knew that he was dying inside. and he passed away after just 3 months in that frightening facility. Now, my grandmother, on the other hand, is 93, and she lives in Southern California, across the street from a Chinese grocery, not far from a Chinese hair salon that knows how to do her perm exactly the way she likes it. She goes to church twice a week and tries to stay active. She and I play mahjong together, that's our thing, and she lets me win once a year on my birthday. And she's actually living life on her own terms, or in Atul Gawande's words, she is the author of her own story. And it brings me incredible peace to know that after caring for so many of us her whole life, that she has the care and support she needs to live well. And so you might wonder, we obviously loved both grandparents tremendously. What made the difference in my grandmother's experience? A woman named Mrs. Sun. Mrs. Sun is the home care worker who comes and looks after my grandmother. Every day, Mrs. Sun and another woman, Mrs. Lee, come and assist my grandmother with the things that have become harder and harder over time, like lifting and cleaning and shopping and cooking, and as she becomes more frail, more activities of daily living are actually becoming challenging. But they make sure that my grandmother gets to church on time, twice a week, every week, and that she makes all of her appointments. And they are also immigrants from China. And while my uncle and my mom do a tremendous amount to support my grandmother, none of us can imagine what it would be like without their support. So, like so many families with aging relatives in America, we didn't have a plan. And our lack of a plan proved devastating for my grandfather. A few years later, in the case of my grandmother, we were fortunate to find Mrs. Sun and Mrs. Lee, but we really kind of just got lucky. But having them has changed everything, and most importantly, my grandmother's quality of life. What's become clear to me is that we, as a country, don't have a plan either. It's not just my family. And that my story is part of a much larger story of what's happening in this country. So here we are in 2017, and we as a country need more care than we ever could have imagined. And we also happen to have less of it, because in the past, we used to rely upon this default care infrastructure of women staying home and caring for family members, right? Well, that simply hasn't been the case for some time, and in fact, 75% of children are growing up in households where all the adults in the household work outside the home. So we're in a very different reality now. And we're also in a situation where the workforce that we count on, like Marlene in the video, to care for our families, to help us care for our families as we age, can't earn enough to put food on the table and care for their own families. The annual median income of a home care worker in 2017 in the United States of America is $13,000 per year. We, at Caring Across Generations, actually think that this is the single most important opportunity of generations to completely reinvent how we take care of each other in America. We need a care infrastructure for the future. Like the grid of infrastructure that once brought water and electricity and internet to every home in America, we now need a care grid to bring great care options to every home and community in this country. Sound impossible? Yes, maybe, but the seeds of the solutions are being planted and growing everywhere. Last year, Nevada became the 8th state to pass a domestic workers' Bill of Rights, which brings protections and fairness to our nation's caregiving workforce. This year, Hawaii actually broke new ground. Governor Ige, the governor of Hawaii, in July, signed the first family caregiver benefit program into law. It's called the Kupuna Caregiver Program. And in Hawaii, as a result of this program, if you are a working family caregiver caring for your aging parent or grandparent at home, you are now eligible for a benefit of up to $70 per day to help you afford respite care or a caregiver to help take your loved one to the doctor so that you don't need to miss work. Incredible breakthrough in Hawaii. I think we should do a round of applause for that one. And now the big idea. In Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, and Illinois, we're laying the groundwork for a new policy idea we call universal family care. Universal family care is the idea that there should be one fund that we all contribute to, that we can all benefit from, that helps us pay for childcare, elder care, paid family leave, support for our loved ones with disabilities, basically everything we need to care for our families at every stage of life as we work. This is our moment to take caregiving from what has been a private, often isolated conversation into the national public conversation about the future. Between family caregivers, professional caregivers, people with disabilities, older adults, and people living in multi-generational households, there are at least 100 million people who are directly affected by the need for care in America. That is an incredibly powerful force for change. At Caring Across Generations, we're building a multi-generational national movement to give voice to the 100 million of us who we believe represent the caring majority in this country. We believe that in this country, we all deserve the support that we all deserve support as we struggle to care for our families. And you're probably thinking, this woman is nuts. We're still fighting off the elimination of Medicaid and 20 million people losing their health care, and she's talking about a whole new program to support families. Well, we actually believe that it is true. We are living in tough times, and the attacks are happening on every front, and including on immigrant communities, who, by the way, represent 40% of our direct care workforce. But what I believe is that it's precisely in moments like these that we need big, bold solutions, particularly the ones that can bring us together as a country and help us focus on the future we can create together. And the risks of not doing this are actually really tremendous. Many people talk about the demographic shifts in this country whereby the year 2040, we become a majority minority nation or majority people of color. We are also an aging nation, the boomers aging, people living longer. If you layer those two demographic shifts on top of each other, what we start to see is that the older population is actually much wider, and the younger population is much more diverse and of color. And in some ways, the state of Arizona foreshadows what could potentially come of the whole country. It's like the canary in the mine. The state of Arizona is the state with the most white people over the age of 65 and the most young people of color under the age of 18, meaning it is the most racially and generationally polarized state in the country. And that kind of demographic polarization is a breeding ground for resentment and division. It's not an accident that Arizona was the birthplace of the notorious anti-immigrant legislation SB 1070, and also the place where Sheriff Joe Arpaio rose to power, the notorious sheriff who made his career off of racial profiling and torturing immigrants in detention centers. He's also the first and only person to be pardoned by this administration for his crimes. If we don't come together as a nation around a vision for the future of this country that unites us and makes life better for all of us, we could continue down a path of polarization, division, and resentment. Care is one place where our interests truly come together. The need for care universally affects us all. And the truth is, if we are to care for every one of us in this country who needs it, it is an all-hands-on-deck situation. We're going to need immigrants, non-immigrants, family caregivers, professional caregivers, people with disabilities, older people. All of us are going to need to be a part of the solution. My friend Van Jones talks about this country as having two truths. At our founding, we had a founding reality, and we had a founding dream. Our founding reality was not pretty. It's not an opinion, it's just a fact that our country was founded on slavery, on the occupation of native lands, on the profound subordination of women. That was our founding reality. And we also had a founding dream, that all men and women are created equal with liberty and justice for all. And what makes us who we are, this motley crew of a country with people from every single religion and nation and culture and tradition, what makes us who we are is that every generation of Americans seeks to bridge the distance between the ugliness and the darkness of our founding reality and the beauty of the dream. That is who we are. We are each founders of a democracy in progress. Putting care at the forefront of our agenda and our values keeps us moving towards the beauty of the dream. At the White House Conference on Aging, a couple of years ago, David Hyde Pierce opened the caregiving panel with the simple lines, "We must remember, to age is to live, and to care is to be human." Care connects us to our most basic and universal needs as humanity, and coming together to bring value, dignity, and worth to our caregiving relationships can help bring out the best in who we are as a country. It can give us courage and keep us grounded in that profound truth that George Saunders tries to instill in our young people, that in the end, we must try at all costs to avoid failures of kindness and take care of one another. Thank you.